Hey guys, everybody hear me? Wow, that's really loud today. Awesome. So everybody's exhausted, I'm sure, being Friday at the end of Ignite. What I want to do is kind of go through a number of the capabilities and tools that we have available that fall under this concept of Power Platform governance and management. And so we're going to talk about some things around security. We're going to talk about data policies. We're going to talk about our Center of Excellence toolkit and the assets that come along with that. We're even going to get into how do I operationalize some of these things and where does DevOps come into play. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm not going to go real deep into any one topic, but what I'm going to try to do is stitch together a number of things that you probably have seen or heard about all week long, where other folks have gone maybe deep into that topic. But I want to kind of bring this back to how do I manage this from an end-to-end perspective, which, you know, from my point of view, I think we really have an answer for that now. A year ago, I think we couldn't say that. You know, a year ago, as I was talking with IT folks, you know, the concern was, oh, we're going to turn this stuff on and people are going to be creating things, and we didn't have a great answer for that. I really feel like we have that answer now with some of the assets and capabilities that have been introduced over the summer and have been enhanced with the latest release wave that's coming out now. So that's kind of what I want to try to do today, is create that sort of end-to-end view of what all those capabilities look like. My name's Jamie Stento. I'm the Business Applications Technical Architect from the Philadelphia MTC. Our Microsoft Technology Centers, we get the opportunity to sit down with customers and really talk about what those challenges are from a business perspective and from an IT perspective. And there's a number of different ways that we engage with customers. We'll do ideation events where we'll bring business and IT together and really start to talk about what are those challenges, what's that vision for the future of the business. And a lot of times those two groups don't have the same answer. They don't have the same perspective on what they're trying to accomplish. We get together through an ideation session and really start to talk about what those things are, how we prioritize the projects that we really want to approach, and then bring technology into the mix, right? Start out with taking technology out, and let's really focus on what it is we're trying to accomplish. Then we can start to bring the right technologies to bear on that problem or that challenge. We'll even go very deep and get hands-on with the technology. So come in with your IT folks. We'll do proof of concepts. You know, we'll do workshops. Bring your use cases in. Let's sit down and build it together. Right, so at the MTC, we get to go, we get to be very strategic, and we also get to go very deep in the technologies. And besides folks like myself that are focused on business applications, so everything around Dynamics and Power Platform, we also have architects that are focused on Azure App Dev, infrastructure and security, data and AI, and modern workplace and collaboration. So we really span the entire scope of all the Microsoft technology stack. And across those MTCs, we have about 53 locations around the world. So there probably is a Microsoft Technology Center near you. If that's an area where you want to engage Microsoft and be able to have more of that customer and partner engagement, reach out to your Microsoft account team, and they can help set that up. So who here is already engaged with Power Platform internally, have things rolled out? Users are already utilizing Power Platform, Power Apps, and Flow. All right, a few, but not too many. Okay, all right, so hopefully this is good. You know, a lot of what I hear from IT is around, oh, we don't want to roll these things out. It's going to be the Wild West. We're going to create applications and processes, and we don't know how to control it, and that's okay. You know, I'm an old guy. 30 years ago, IT was saying the same thing about word processors and spreadsheets, right? So let's roll that forward, right? We don't limit what people do with documents now. We provide them storage. We provide them sharing capabilities. We provide them collaboration capabilities. Let's do the same thing with these applications and business processes. And, oh, by the way, let's give tools to the entire organization so that they can create those applications and processes that they need and get that out of the IT backlog, right? One of the challenges that, and across the entire Power Platform, you know, now we sort of have this new view or this updated view of what that means, what the Power Platform really means. We had Power Apps, we had Flow, now it's called Power Automate. We've added virtual agents. We've had Power BI in there, right? So all of these tools that are available to not only IT, but our citizen developers that come out of our different business groups across the organization. So some of the challenges that we run into around these applications, and one of the things that I hear from IT all the time is, oh, you know, the business is always changing what they want, or they always want something new, they always want something different. But let's take a step back. If the business isn't changing, we're probably not in business anymore, right? The market is going to change. Market needs are going to change. The business is always going to want to adapt to that. The question is, how do we do that from an IT perspective? And with Power Platform and the tool set that we're able to give people, we're able to provide a tool set that allows those business users to create those data visualizations that they can put in applications and they can bring up on their desktop. They're able to build web applications, mobile applications very quickly. IT is able to help them with that process. And we're able to do all of that in a scalable, secure environment within your Office 365, your Azure tenant, right? We can control the permissions, we can define security, we can define data policies. We can do all of those things, and we can operationalize all of that. The question then just becomes, well, how do we do that? Some of the things that we run into from an IT perspective is, you know, you're always going to run into these shadow IT scenarios, right? That's just one example. If we're not providing capability to the business, they're going to go find it themselves. That's one of the reasons why, you know, we see a lot of organizations, they brought in Slack. You know, one of the departments brought in Slack. Now I can't control that through my data policies, right? So let's get the capabilities in the hands of our business users where I can control it and create standards and put some process in place. And that's really where we're trying to go with this. So we've put together kind of a philosophy, a very high-level philosophy around what governance looks like, because governance really is an individual preference. It's different for every organization. And so how you really define your governance and your processes is going to be specific to your organization. The difference then becomes, how does Microsoft provide tools and capability to help get you there? And that's really what we're going to try to cover here today. You know, at a very high level, the idea here is start small and grow, right? Let's not overcomplicate things from the very beginning. Let's start small and grow. And that's really where we want to try to go with this. So we'll start out talking a little bit about security and what that means. And when we start to talk about security, we start talking about, well, who are the people, who are the users in our organization that are going to utilize these tools? And when I talk about tools, I'm talking about Power Apps, I'm talking about Power Automate, Power BI, and virtual agents. So who are the people in our organization that are going to utilize these tools? Some of the folks are going to be developers, our pro developers. Some processes, some scenarios are going to require some custom code in the background. But let's try to limit that as much as we can. Some of those users are going to be our business users, the folks that understand the business process and the task that they're trying to accomplish and want to create applications to be able to solve those things. So one of the first places we'll start, and I'll bring this up, I'm going to switch over and switch over my screen here a second. One of the first places that we start is this concept of environments. And so within your Power Platform environment, you have within your tenant the ability to go to the Power Platform Admin Center. And within the Admin Center, this is where you can manage your environments. An environment is where I have applications, flows. I might have common data service. I can define which users or groups of users have access to that particular environment. Now, one of the things that I heard from IT when we first brought this out was you have a default environment and all of the users in my organization have access to it. So yes, we do, and you can see that on my screen here. There's this default environment here right in the center of the screen. Every user in your tenant has access by default to that default environment. You can't delete the environment. You have to go in and manually try to turn that off. My argument is always, though, let's not turn that off. Let's make that the place where users can go in and create personal productivity assets, little applications, little automations that help them get their job done, help them get through their day. We can define security around that and what they can do. You'll see in this environment, you know, the default environment, I can rename it. I can't delete it, but I can rename it. So one of the things I typically recommend is, let's call it personal productivity. It gives your users the understanding of, oh, this is where I go to put my personal stuff. You'll notice in here, it says add database, right? I haven't created a database in here. There's no common data service associated with this environment. I usually recommend people start that way. Now, you may have a reason, you may have need to put common data service in here where your business users can create their own entities, their own data model, be able to store data in there. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I typically recommend don't put common data service in here. Let your users create their apps and processes that don't require that database in this environment. The experience that you're looking at when I go into the settings, the configuration for this environment, this is the experience that you'll see when you don't have common data service deployed in an environment. When we look at security, you're going to see two different roles here. That's all that's there, two roles. I'm either an environment admin, where I have control over that entire environment, or I'm an environment maker, where I can make apps and flows and assets that live in this environment. If we look at the environment admin role, I'm the only one in there. I own this environment. I'm the administrator of the tenant. I'm the only person that has the admin role, the environment admin role in this environment. If I go back and look at, if I go back and look at the environment maker role includes my whole tenant. So this is where all the users in my tenant have the ability to create apps and flows and virtual agents in this tenant. Now we say, well, okay, we can talk about security from the perspective of what users have access to that environment, but how are we limiting what they have access to? And that's where data policies come into play. Now, one of the things I typically recommend is create a global data policy, a data policy that you're going to apply to all of your environments. And we'll take a look at what that data policy actually looks like. Now, one of the things that you can set for a data policy is which environments get this policy. So I can always select one or more environments, or I can apply to all environments. I have that capability. If we take a look at what that data policy really means, you'll see two groups in here: business data only, no business data allowed. Don't get hung up on the names. You could call them Bob and Ed. It doesn't matter. The key concept here is that we're separating connectors and we're defining which connectors can communicate with each other. If connectors are not in the same group, they can't communicate with each other. So one of the things that I recommend to people is say, hey, let's start out with a global policy where we take your Office 365, your Microsoft services that your users utilize every day. Let's put those together in business data only. Everything else, all your third-party consumer services, those connectors, leave them in no business data allowed. So now your Microsoft services that users utilize every day, typically moving business data around, can't communicate with those third-party connectors, like Twitter, for example. One of the big examples that I always like to use is separate Twitter from your business data, right? We don't want those two things communicating with each other. Now, marketing may want to be able to bring data in through Twitter so that they can store it, but we want to make sure data is not going out through Twitter. We don't have that directionality on the connectors yet, but that's coming. That's something that's on the roadmap. The key thing, though, is I can create data policies that are exception policies. So I have my global policy that I apply to all environments, but I may have some environments where I want to make an exception. And you can see that in here. I've set up an exception policy that I'm only applying to certain environments. So we've gone through a process of talking to a team, a department, an application development team, whoever it is, we've talked to them about this is what the application does, or this is what our need is. We've qualified that and approved it and said, okay, I'm going to apply an exception data policy to those environments so that that team has the connectors that can talk to each other. So when we're talking about data policies, it's another mechanism for us to manage the data that flows between all of these different connectors that users have access to. I'm going to go back over to my environments again. And so we talked a little bit about the default environment. We talked a little bit about what that experience looks like when you don't have Common Data Service deployed. So this is another environment. This is a sandbox environment. You might spin this up for users that want to do some development work, or they want to do some learning as a team. You can do that as a sandbox. And again, this is a place where I did not deploy Common Data Service. Be the same experience that we walked through with that default environment. Another way that users might spin up environments is we have the concept of a community plan, where users can go and they can create their own environment in your tenant, but they're the only user that's allowed in that environment. They can create apps, they can do different things, but they can't share those assets with anyone, and no one else can access that environment. The idea there being we have a sort of a development environment, a trial concept that users can work in. It's a free plan, so users can work in that. It doesn't cost me licenses. But I can't share anything out of that environment. So it works as a good learning tool for people. Some of the other environments that I have defined here, you can see some of where I have some application environments where I have this Thrive application. So I have test, UAT, dev, prod. Another concept that you can use environments for is that dev, test, prod, promoting code from one environment to another. So I might configure environments to work like that. Your structure around environments is going to vary based on your organization, but your environments are really going to be focused on a purpose or a group of people, right? And that's how you're going to end up managing those things. If we take a look at an environment where I do have Common Data Service deployed, you'll see here we have a little bit different experience, right? I have some details on here. I can go in and there's some different information I can edit. I actually have a URL defined for this environment, and that's because I have Common Data Service. When I go into the settings, I have a lot more controls available to me because I've deployed Common Data Service. Now, one of the confusing things that we run into is what's Common Data Service, what's Power Apps, what are these different things? When I deploy Common Data Service, I always have model-driven Power Apps. I always have that capability available to me. I can define and configure the data model, and on top of that data model, I have forms, views. I get forms over data by default. Now, whether or not I'm creating model-driven apps, that's a preference in how I'm going to configure my applications. But as soon as you deploy Common Data Service, you have the capability to create model-driven apps. If we take a look at security roles in here, and around these settings, I have a lot more control over the behavior within that environment that includes Common Data Service. If we take a look at security roles, you'll see it's a little bit different. And if there are any Dynamics veterans in here, this will look very familiar to you. I still have my environment maker role, but I have some other roles, security roles, that are defined in here. And if we open up those roles, we'll see I can start to become very granular in how I define my security roles by defining what specific entities this security role gives a user access to and what operations they can perform. And this is a little bit of an eye chart, but you can see a little bit what we're talking about here, right? I can define at the entity level, and this will show any of the entities that are defined in Common Data Service in this environment. I can define what operations are available for a user to perform and at what level they can perform those operations. So I can get very granular with these security roles. I can also copy that role and create new custom security roles in here. So I can really define how users interact with the common data service by creating these security roles. I'm going to take a look at another environment where I've actually deployed Dynamics 365. So again, with Dynamics 365, you have common data service deployed in there, so this experience is going to look the same. I can go into settings, I have the same sorts of controls that I have over the behavior of this environment, but now when I go in and I take a look at security roles, I'm going to have even more roles. So again, for Dynamics veterans, you're going to recognize the account manager, the business manager, the customer service. All of these roles, this whole concept of security roles is what came out of Microsoft Dynamics over the last 100 years. You know, we've been doing this a long time. But again, the same security model and granular permissions model that I can create for my users. So we went through what those environments look like, a couple of different experiences depending on whether or not you have common data service deployed. We talked about data policies, data loss prevention policies a little bit, and how you can define those in here. Again, with the security roles, with those data policies, start simple, right? Let's start small and then grow from there. A couple other things that are available to you in this world. If we start to look at, I'm going to jump over to another environment. Let me take a look over here. If we take a look at users real quick and take a look at the roles that are available to my users in an environment, within Office 365, when we start talking about managing roles, you have a concept of having a global administrator, right? But we don't have to give people global admin. We can give them, and I'll blow this up in a second so you can see it a little bit better. We can actually give them the Dynamics 365 admin role. Right now, that's the role that will give them access to be an administrator in Power Platform. So you can have multiple people on your team who can manage and administer Power Platform, but we don't have to give them global admin rights within the tenant, right? My AD guys never want to do that, but we can give people admin rights just for Power Platform. Now, I believe in spring, but sometime coming soon, we are going to have additional, service-specific roles around Power Platform that are going to allow you to sort of distinguish between, do I have someone who goes deep in administering Dynamics 365? Do I have people who are administering Power Platform? So that capability is going to be coming. But even now, you can still limit some of those admin capabilities that you can provide users. One of the other things that, that we have available to us, I'm going to switch back over to slides real quick. We talked about environments. This is an example of what an environment structure could look like, and this is really just illustrative, but the idea here is around creating environments that are specific to a purpose. So it might be that dev, test, prod scenario. It might be a marketing, sales, customer service scenario. It might be I have this application that I manage through dev, test, sales. I have environments that are specific to an application or set of applications. Just depends on how you want to structure that within your organization. The other thing to know about environments is they're geo-specific, right? So when I create an environment in a specific tenant, that environment lives in that geographic location. So we talked about this, some examples of a strategy around how to define my environments. Again, the idea is making them purpose-built, purpose-specific. So when we talk about security, there are these layers that we like to talk about. So from an AD perspective, I have the ability to utilize conditional access from an AD scenario. And we talked about the way that we can define common data service security roles. We have Power Platform security roles like environment maker and environment admin. So different ways that we can define these layers of security. But one of the key items in here is the security of your data assets. One of the things I hear from IT all the time is, oh, I don't want users to create applications and have access to this data. Power Platform doesn't give your users access to anything they don't already have access to. And we need to be very clear about that. When we talk about security of our data, our business data, we need to secure the data at the source, right? So let's secure data where it lives. We'll do that the right way. And then Power Platform, it isn't giving users any access to anything they don't already own. If you have users that are creating Excel spreadsheets and they're pulling data out of a database into the Excel spreadsheet, they create pivot tables, they share that Excel file with people through email, which isn't secure, or they're putting that Excel spreadsheet in a shared drive somewhere, and then someone's connection to the shared drive fails and you're getting a support ticket in IT, you're already supporting these things as their applications. We think of them as just being spreadsheets, but they're really applications, and your users have access to that data. So let's think about it in terms of secure the data at the source, and then we can start to provide tools for our users on a platform that we can secure and manage and monitor to give them the ability to create those applications and processes that they really need. So we talked a little bit about data loss prevention already. I showed you what that looks like. A new concept that we just rolled out into general availability is the ability to share applications with guest users. So if I have Azure B2B configured in my Azure tenant, I can invite guest users to my tenant, and I can share applications with them just like I would anybody else in the organization. So some areas that some of the customers I've spoken to where they want to take advantage of this is where they have customers who they provide services to. Let's say I have customers who order products from me. I want them to be able to go to an application where they can check off products that they want to order, create their order within an application that I've built, goes against my data sources, my product catalog, but I make that application available to users in that customer organization. I can invite them as a guest user to my AD tenant, give them access to that application, and they can place orders. They can interact with my organization through those applications and still trigger automated processes that run in the background to help that order processing scenario if that's the case. So guest access is something that's new. One of the things around guest access is your users, those guest users, they do need to have a Power Platform license somewhere. So either you're giving them a license as a guest user, or maybe more appropriately, they have their own license for Power Platform. But it's not a case where we always have to license that guest user coming in. As long as they have Power Platform licenses from their organization, they can utilize those apps from your organization. So that's a pretty nice tool. This slide is included in here just to kind of point out the difference between, well, when would I use a portal versus when would I provide guest access to, say, a Canvas app? And portals are really defined around, I can expose common data service entities. I can expose those things through a portal. Portals allow anonymous access. Maybe that may be the scenario that you want. It may not be. Where those Canvas apps where I'm using guest access for those types of applications, that's where I'm going to have more control over my security mechanism, and I'm actually having a user log in to my application, right? So just slightly different scenarios there. So we talked about security. We talked about those data policies. Let's talk about how do we monitor the environment? How do we monitor what's going on in the environment? And one of the things we'd want to be able to do is from an Office 365 perspective, right? I want to know what's going on in my environment. So I'm going to switch back over to my application here. And we're going to take a look at the Security and Compliance Center that lives in your O365 tools. So in Security and Compliance Center, I can go into my audit log search. And this is where Power Platform, your apps, your flows, all of the tooling participates in audit logging, activity logging within Office 365. So I can search for any of the different kinds of activities that go on in Office 365. I can search for things like, if I look at apps, for example, I can find my Power Apps activities. So I might want to know when an app is created, edited, deleted. I might want to do the same thing with Flow. So I can find Flow activities, when a flow is created, edited, deleted, right? I can get that list. If I do a search on this, I'm going to pull back the activities that have occurred within my tenant. This is across all environments. I can get all of the activity that has occurred within my O365 tenant because Power Platform participates in that activity logging. I can create new alert policies too, so when some of these activities occur, I can be notified of those things, or I might have a monitoring team that wants to be notified of these things. So your Office 365 Security and Compliance Center helps to monitor what's going on within the environment, within your tenant. We can also take a look at ways that I can automate that. So this is a flow where I can run this flow every night. The idea here, though, the key is I can use the, I can use the HTTP connector, just a generic HTTP connector, to go hit the audit log. And in this case, the operation I'm looking for is create flow. So this particular automation will go query every night the O365 audit log, activity log, and bring me back all of the instances where, all the activities where a flow was created. And it's just going to package those things up and send me an email with that information. I can show you what that email looks like. Right, so here's an example of that email. Here's where a new flow was created. And I can see who created it. I can see all the internal IDs, all that good stuff. Right, so based on that activity, I can do some things with that just because I've captured that in a nightly process, if you will. Other things that we can do is within your applications, when users are creating Canvas applications. Now this is an application that we built internally for a retail customer. The key thing here though is I'm going out and I'm getting data, and we have a new tool in here called the Monitor tool. And I'll blow this up so you can see it. This Monitor tool, it's experimental right now, just like it says, and the things that we're capturing right now are around access to tabular data, and we're really only doing it at a network level right now. But we're going to be continually expanding the capabilities in this monitor so that we can look at things like the collections and variables that are inside of an application. How's the application performing in general? There's a lot more capability that will be built into this. But I want to show you what this looks like. I'm going to open the monitor, and that comes up in a separate screen. But this monitor instance is connected to my application that I ran it from. So now when I run this application, it's going to start to monitor the data activity. So I have a list of items here. If I open up a particular item and I edit this, maybe I want to edit the inventory, and I'm going to save that. So I've done all of these activities, right? I've done all these transactions. If we look at the monitoring tool, we can see that it started to capture those transactions. If I grab just one of those transactions and we see what that looks like, I can see that out here on the side, right, I have a JSON package that helps me understand what was the operation that took place at that step in the application. I can also see the formula that was written in the application that triggered that transaction, right? I can look at what the request looked like. That request that went out to Common Data Service to go grab data, what did that look like? And I can also look at the details of the response. Now, one of the cool things with the response, and like I said, right now we're only doing tabular data, but I can really look at that data as a table the way it came back to me, right? So this monitor tool, it's new, it's experimental. We're going to be continuing to expand on it, but it's a great tool that's going to help you start to monitor performance of applications. From an IT perspective, the support that we can give our business users as they're creating those applications. So that was around monitoring. Let me switch back to the slides here a second. And we talked about the Office 365 audit log, the activity log. One of the other things that helps us from a monitoring standpoint are what we call admin connectors. We have a bunch of administrative capabilities that are built into Power Platform that we've exposed through connectors that you can utilize in Power Apps and Flow. Those same operations are also available as PowerShell commandlets, so they can be incorporated into the other automations, the other scripts, the other processes that you run from a monitoring perspective within your organization. I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about there. Excuse me. So this is a flow that says, hey, get me a list of new Power Apps and flows and connectors that showed up in my environment. But one of the key things here is this get environments, right? This get environments action comes from one of the admin connectors. So it's very easy for me to create automations that utilize those tools. I'll show you real quick where that comes from. If I want to add an action here, and I do a search for, let's say I do a search for Power Apps. I'm going to come back with a bunch of connectors, and you'll see in here like Power Platform for admins. You'll see Power Apps notification, Power Apps for admins, right? These admin connectors, we have the same type of thing for Flow. Those admin connectors can be utilized in your applications, your processes. They can also be used as command shell scripts in your other automations within the organization. If we take a look at, let me remove this. There we go. So if we take a look at what else is going on in here, in this particular flow, I'm saying, hey, get me all of my environments, and for all of the environments, get me a list of flows. Get me a list of connectors, get me a list of apps. I can pull all that information together and send that to a distribution list, or even just to myself as an administrator. I can send that in an email, sort of like a report. Now, one of the really cool things is you're saying, well, how am I going to build this? And I want to be able to see that flow, and I can't see it when you show it up on the screen like that. Guess what? That's okay. Because if I go into templates and I do a search for admin, you're going to see a whole bunch of templates that are available to you to create these processes on the fly, right? So I can take this as a starting point, tweak it for my own needs, but I have all of that capability built into the templates that are available to me. So let me switch back over to slides real quick. And as I said, there's a lot going on in this whole discussion because we have a pretty good, I think we have a pretty good end-to-end answer here. So we talked about monitoring. How am I going to monitor what's happening within the environment? Let's talk a little bit about alerting and actions. How do I find out when something happened? So again, those admin connectors that I just talked about, they're not just there from a reporting perspective, but they're also there to be able to enforce policies. So we can do some things where we say, hey, you know, I recognize that someone created a new flow or a new application, and it's the first one that they created. Well, let's have a welcoming email where we send them some links to training resources and things that they should know about, right? So what would something like that look like? I have a user here where, did it switch over? Here we go. So in this case, I have a user where last week, Amy created a flow a week ago, and it was the first asset that she created in Power Platform, and so we sent her this email, this welcome email, right? I can automate that process so that I know when a person created something for their first time. I can also start to enforce some things where I say, well, this person created an asset, but I don't have a record of them taking any of the training that we've been providing. Let me encourage them to take training. Here's how you find some of those assets, right? We can start to engage the community of citizen developers on the fly as they're using these tools. So the question is around, can I find out if someone's, for example, reading all of the mailboxes in the organization and tell them to stop doing that? So my first response to that would be, let's secure the data at the source, right? Our users probably shouldn't have access to all the mailboxes in the organization. If they do, then we have to think about, well, why is that? Is there a reason for that? Is it okay? Maybe it is. Probably not okay, so we should secure the data at the source, and then Power Platform isn't giving them access to anything. To further answer that question, those admin connectors that I was talking about, only folks that have the environment admin role can use those connectors in an environment. So your regular business users aren't using those connectors. Those are connectors where I can do things like, we've done a lot of work over the last year and a half with Chevron, for example. And they've rolled out a great program around Power Platform and the way they engage with their users in Power Platform, where they say, we can self-serve. We can allow users to self-serve. When they want an environment, they go to an application and they say, I want an environment. Here's what I'm going to use it for. Once it gets through a quick approval process, we spin up the environment for them. Now that environment's only good for 30 days, and then it gets torn down. So it gives you an environment to be able to try things out, do proof of concept, do some learning. But then you say, well, I created some cool stuff. I want to be able to move that into a production environment. Well, okay, we can automate that process too. And hopefully I have time. I can touch on that in a couple of seconds as well. But one of the things that I do want to take a look at here is I'm going to skip over a couple pieces that are in the slides. You'll see them a little bit later. And if we look up at the little screen up there, you'll see this is just an example of all of the operations that are available to you in those admin connectors. When you take a look at these slides, you'll see the details in there. I'm not going to go into details on all of them, of course. But that brings me to one of the tools that we've provided maybe a couple of months ago, and this is available for you to download, is the Center of Excellence Toolkit. And I'll switch back over if you guys want to take pictures instead of downloading the slides. If you go to aka.ms COE Starter Kit, you can download our Center of Excellence Starter Kit. And what that tool set provides you is a number of assets that are pre-built that you can tweak for your own needs, that do a lot of those things that I was just talking about, like sending that welcoming email or providing applications for users to utilize when they want to provision things. So on my screen, I'm looking at the Center of Excellence solution, and you can see there's a number of different assets that are available in here. But here's what some of those assets look like. We have a Development Compliance Center. Right? That Developer Compliance Center is a way that users can go in, and if they've created an application, but maybe they haven't provided the business justification for that app, we're going to send them email because we're going to check every night, do we have all of the compliance information that we want for the assets that have been created? We're going to send that person an email. Go into the Compliance Center and fill in this information. So here's an application that's pre-built to allow you to do that. We have a tool that you can use as an administrator to graphically work on your data policy. So I showed you the native data policy editing, but within this application, I get a richer interface where I can start to say, okay, here are the connectors, my non-business connectors. What happens if I move the Office 365 connector to business data only? And I start to get a list of all the different apps and processes across my entire tenant that are going to be affected. They'll stop working if I move that connector to a different category, right? So that DLP editor is a really nice tool. It gives us a little bit more visual feedback. These are the types of things that are available in the Center of Excellence toolkit. One of the other big things is this Power Platform admin view. With the Center of Excellence toolkit, there's a process that runs nightly, and it basically trolls my entire tenant and goes through and says, give me all the apps, flows, the people that are creating these assets. I want to log all of that information in Common Data Service and be able to provide a monitoring tool, a place where I can dig into those details. And I can start to look at, here are all the apps that were created. What does an app look like? Now, this is pre-built, but you can add fields to this. You can add, your own compliance needs to this. You can add on to the business process flow that's defined in here. So when a user wants to create an app and we go through an approval process, I might create some additional steps in this business process flow. You can tweak all this stuff. We're giving you a starting point. So that's around our Center of Excellence Starter Kit. Again, utilize the tools that are available to be able to start small and grow. You can start to secure, monitor, then start to engage with the community. Bring the business users in, bring those citizen developers into a platform with standards and controls that you've put in place. Now, one of the last things I want to show you, even though I'm out of time here, so thanks for hanging out. We have DevOps tools. We have scripted activities. When we start to talk about your DevOps process and you say, okay, we built stuff from a development standpoint. We want to promote that to a test environment. We want to promote that to a production environment. I have a DevOps process internally where we manage these things. How does Power Platform play into that? We have connectors for that, or we have activities for that. If I take a look at, this is a scenario where I just built 2 simple build pipelines in Azure DevOps. The first one just says, export my stuff from a dev environment because I'm going to move that out to our repo. And you can see in here some of the steps that I've added to this build pipeline where I'm installing the Power Apps tool selector and I'm using steps to export the solution from one environment and then unpack that solution and move it out to my repo. The concept here is, if you're not a Dynamics veteran, we always have this concept of solutions. A solution is a set of assets. It might be entities, it might be apps, flows. I can bring all of those assets together in a solution, and I can export that package. What the solution packager tool does for us in the background is decompose that into its requisite parts and allows me to push all that stuff out to a repo where I have all of those things available to me. For example, here's all my entities, right? So I have all of that information available to me, and I'm starting to version control everything. So then I can start to say, okay, get me latest, use those Power Apps build tools to get latest, package up a new solution, push that solution out as an artifact, allow me to deploy that solution to test, to prod, to UAT, right? I start to create my build and release pipelines in DevOps, utilizing the tools, the resources, the processes that we already have in place. Okay, so just went through a lot of information. I didn't go real deep on anything. Continue to investigate and research and learn more about these different topics, but I really feel like we have that end-to-end solution now. We're going to continue to evolve. We're going to continue to bring capability and tools to you. But I really feel like we have that solution now that allows us to secure the environment, and it also allows us to be part of a deployment process. So I hope that helps bring all that information together for you guys. Thanks for coming, guys.